Here's $250,000. Shut your mouth and let your sister live. My father slammed an envelope into my face. He was trying to buy my silence so I wouldn't destroy the fake career of his favorite, who had been stealing my ideas for years. But when I checked the account, I almost vomited. He had stolen that money from an orphan relief fund. I didn't just refuse the bribe, I destroyed them both. My sister lost everything, and my father was led away in handcuffs right from the family dinner table. My name is Nora Vance, and at a recent family gathering, my sister introduced me as the family disappointment. Her boss, however, offered a different perspective. The terrace of the estate in Lexington smelled of smoked brisket and aged Chardonnay. Crimson and gold balloons bobbed above the linen-draped tables, celebrating my father's 60th birthday. The guests wore practiced, polite smiles, everyone except me. I stood near the perimeter of the patio, arms crossed, watching my stepsister Paige, Arthur's daughter with Beverly, parade her employer through the crowd as if he were a prize stallion. She slipped her arm through his and announced to the head table, her voice carrying over the music, "And this, everyone, is the failure of our family." Laughter rippled through the group. Beverly let out a high, brittle giggle. Arthur, my father, chuckled comfortably. Even the cousins nodded, accustomed to the rhythm of my exclusion. Every gaze turned to me. The clinking of silver against china ceased. The ambient chatter died out. Her boss remained silent, hands buried in the pockets of his charcoal suit, studying the slate pavers. Then he tilted his head, a faint, unreadable smile touching his lips. "Interesting," he said, his tone perfectly even. "Because you're fired." Paige's grin froze in place. The yard went deadly still. To understand the weight of that silence, you have to understand the years of noise that preceded it. Earlier that afternoon, I had pulled into the driveway of the old colonial house Arthur had kept all these years. The porch light flickered with a neglect that mirrored the interior, and the mailbox listed heavily to one side. I grabbed a stack of flattened boxes from my trunk and stepped inside, the screen door whining on its hinges behind me. My mother's belongings sat stacked in the corner of the guest room, each box labeled in her neat, precise handwriting. I knelt on the dust-covered floor and began the slow work of sorting: old recipe cards, photo albums, a wool scarf she wore every winter until the end. That was when I found a small velvet pouch tucked inside a baking encyclopedia. Inside was a USB drive, unlabeled, just a sleek silver device I didn't recognize. I sat on the floorboards and plugged it into my laptop. Files populated the screen. Campaign briefs, mood boards, taglines, content I had written 5 years ago for an energy client. My stomach plummeted. Every single file had been repurposed. Word for word, image for image. But the credits didn't belong to me. They belonged to a producer at WBN News named Paige Vance. Paige was Arthur's daughter with his second wife, Beverly. Riley, their youngest, was 19 now and away at university most of the year. Growing up, however, the house revolved around Paige and Riley. I was the remnant of my mother's first marriage to Arthur, the one they tolerated but never absorbed. My mother, Catherine, died when I was 17. It was fast and brutal. One day she was teaching me how to make her signature cornbread, and the next she was gone. Arthur remarried Beverly 6 months later. Beverly arrived with Paige, who was 11 then, all curls and loud confidence. Riley arrived 2 years later. From the start, the rules were bifurcated. Paige received private dance lessons, a new wardrobe every season, and a convertible on her 16th birthday, a bright red sports car parked exactly where I stood now. I received hand-me-downs and a transit pass. Beverly packed Paige's lunches with handwritten notes and sandwiches cut into heart shapes. Mine was a peanut butter sandwich in a brown paper bag, if I was lucky. Arthur never intervened. He would ruffle Paige's hair and call her his girl, while I washed dishes or mowed the expensive lawn to earn gas money. When I needed braces, Beverly claimed the family couldn't afford the expense. 2 months later, Paige was fitted for premium clear aligners. I learned early that asking for anything only resulted in a lecture on gratitude, so I stopped asking. University was the breaking point. I had been accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship. Arthur sat me down in his study and explained that the family budget was tight. Beverly wanted Paige in a private prep school, and Riley needed orthodontic work now, too. My scholarship didn't cover housing, which meant I had to commute over an hour each way on the bus. I endured it for 2 semesters, working nights at a diner and sleeping 4 hours a night. Paige, conversely, was given a luxury dorm suite, a meal plan, and discretionary spending money. Arthur bragged to his business partners about her journalism classes while I carried trays of greasy food to pay for textbooks. When I finally dropped out to work full-time just to survive, Beverly told the neighbors I lacked the mental fortitude for higher education. Arthur just nodded, accepting the narrative. I moved out at 20 into a studio apartment above a laundromat in a rougher part of the city. There was no farewell dinner, no assistance with the rent. Paige texted me, "Guess you're sinking or swimming on your own now." Riley was only 8 then, but even she understood the hierarchy. She waved from the upstairs window as I loaded my duffel bag into a friend's rusted sedan. Years passed. I built something from nothing. Paige coasted on potential. Riley watched. Beverly continued to cook separate dinners, steaks for her daughters, canned soup for me on the rare occasions I visited. Arthur managed a local charitable foundation, publicly preaching family values while ignoring the daughter who paid her own way. The USB drive sat open on my screen, the proof undeniable in black and white. Every idea I had poured myself into within that cramped studio, every late night, every missed meal, had been stolen and exploited by the sister who had been handed everything. I closed the laptop and stared at the velvet pouch in my hand. My mother had kept this. She must have known. Every late night, every skip meal, every ounce of effort had been stolen and weaponized by the sister who had been handed everything on a silver platter. I closed the laptop and stared at the velvet pouch in my hand. My mother had kept this. She had known. The next morning, I called Sasha. Sasha Reed had been my freshman year roommate, the genius who taught me how to stretch $5 into a week's worth of groceries. She picked up on the second ring, her voice raspy from a late shift. I told her I needed help with a digital forensic issue but gave no details. She didn't ask questions. She just told me to come over. Coffee was already brewing. Her apartment sat above a muffler repair shop on the gritty edge of downtown Cincinnati, about 20 minutes from the manicured lawns of Lexington. I parked behind a stack of discarded tires and climbed the rusted metal stairs. Sasha opened the door in oversized sweatpants, her hair thrown into a chaotic bun. She handed me a cheap mug that read I turned coffee into cold and ushered me inside. We sat at her Formica kitchen table, the laptop open between us. I slid the USB drive across the surface. She raised a pierced eyebrow but plugged it in without a word. Files populated the screen. She scrolled, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses, then let out a low, impressed whistle. "These are yours?" she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Every single one." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "You want me to trace the metadata?" "That's why I'm here." Sasha worked with terrifying speed, pulling timestamps, cross-referencing file paths, and matching font libraries and hex codes. By the time the coffee had gone cold, she had constructed a damning timeline, 5 years of my intellectual property uploaded to the WBN News 12 server under Paige's login credentials. The same Paige who thought I was still struggling to pay rent. I stared at the screen, memories flooding back. My first big break had come at 22, freelancing for a small logistics firm outside of Louisville. The owner paid in cash and prepaid fuel cards. I had designed a safety protocol campaign that cut workplace accidents by 30%. Word spread. More gigs followed, drilling firms, pipeline startups, refineries. I learned to pitch, negotiate, and close deals while Paige was learning how to pose for headshots. At 25, I registered Meridian Dynamics out of a co-working space in the warehouse district. One desk, one chair, one dream. I hired my first employee 6 months later, a junior copywriter who quit after 2 weeks. I didn't blame her. Payroll was late, rent was due, and instant noodles were dinner. But the work kept coming. I landed a statewide safety contract, then a massive rebranding project for a midstream energy giant. Revenue hit 6 figures, then 7. I moved the office to a renovated loft near the stadium, hired a real team, and bought ergonomic furniture. By 30, Meridian Dynamics was pulling in $12 million a year, serving clients from Houston to Chicago. I kept it quiet. No social media humble brags, no family updates. Arthur asked once what I did. I said, consulting. He grunted and changed the subject to Paige's latest broadcast. Beverly assumed I was barely scraping by. Paige bragged incessantly about her producer title at the station, never once noticing the parent company listed on her direct deposit advice, Meridian Dynamics. Julian Cole ran the Lexington branch. I had hired him 3 years earlier after he turned a failing pipeline campaign into a regional award winner. He was sharp, loyal, and devoid of ego. He reported directly to me, handled local hires, and approved budgets. Paige had started 6 months ago as a segment producer, entry-level, low stakes, working under my company without realizing I owned the building she walked into every day. Sasha closed the laptop with a snap. You built an empire, she said softly. And your sister has been shoplifting from the gift shop. I rubbed my temples. The numbers didn't lie. Paige had access because WBN News 12 was a subsidiary of Meridian. She had logged in with generic staff credentials, copied my archive files, stripped the visible metadata, and passed them off as her own genius concepts. Julian never caught it. Why would he? She was just another junior staffer submitting content. I thought about those late nights in that first drafty office, the 2 a.m. client calls, the pitch decks rebuilt from scratch after hard drive crashes. Every win had been mine alone. No family trust fund, no safety net. Just me, a laptop, and a refusal to quit. Sasha poured more coffee, the liquid dark and bitter. What now? I looked out her window at the skyline, the morning sun glinting off the glass towers. Now I decide how this ends. Paige texted that afternoon. Her message appeared while I was still staring at the city from Sasha's window. Family barbecue this weekend. Bring a dessert. Julian is coming. I read it twice, my thumbs hovering over the cracked screen of my burner phone. Dessert. She typed it casually, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just been fired in front of everyone in my timeline, though in hers, the X hadn't fallen yet. I set the phone down and reopened the USB files. Sasha had exported the forensic data into a spreadsheet, columns of dates, file names, and user IDs. The earliest upload traced back 5 years, right after I had completed that first safety campaign for the logistics firm. The client had loved that first campaign, requesting frame prints for every site office. Paige must have seen the mock-ups when I emailed Arthur a thank you note with photos attached, a naive attempt to share a professional milestone with a father who barely registered my existence. Scrolling further, I found a pipeline rebranding strategy I'd pitched to a Houston firm. The color palette was identical. The tagline was verbatim. But on the screen, it was presented as Paige's original concept in a segment for WBN News 12. Another file revealed a hydraulic fracturing awareness series I'd created for a non-profit grant. She had replaced my carefully sourced stock imagery with lower-quality local footage and added it under her byline. Sasha leaned over my shoulder, squinting at the screen. She didn't even change the font, she muttered, disgust dripping from her voice. The cunning is off. That is just lazy. I pulled up the server logs. Paige's login credentials appeared nightly, usually just after 10 p.m., the same hours she claimed to be working late on intensive edits. In reality, she was downloading my folders, renaming them, stripping the creation dates, and uploading everything to the station's shared drive. Julian had access to the same system, but he never cross-checked credits. Why would he? Producers submitted content all the time. He had no reason to suspect his rising star was a parasite. I cross-referenced each campaign with its air date. Every stolen idea had been broadcast within a week of her uploads. The station's ratings soared. Sponsors renewed their contracts. Paige earned bonuses, promotions, and a corner cubicle with a view of the river. Meanwhile, I had been invoicing clients directly, building Meridian dynamics brick by brick, oblivious to the theft. One file stood out, a 30-second spot for a refinery turnaround project. I had spent 3 weeks crafting it, sourcing B-roll from 3 different states and syncing the voiceover to safety statistics to create a somber, impactful rhythm. Paige had aired it verbatim, except she had overlaid it with upbeat, generic stock music that completely undermined the message. The client had called me later to praise the visual work while politely questioning the jarring audio choice. I had thanked them and apologized, assuming a junior editor at my own firm had made a mistake. I opened the original brief. My signature sat at the bottom, dated and locked. Paige's version bore a new footer, produced by Paige Vance, WBN News 12. No mention of Meridian. No mention of me. Sasha exported the evidence into a secure folder, encrypted it, and backed it up on 3 separate hard drives. This is ironclad, she said, leaning back in her chair. Intellectual property theft, plagiarism, breach of contract. She's finished. I nodded, though my mind was already racing ahead. Paige thought Julian was her mentor, her golden ticket to the national stage. She had no idea he reported to me. She had no idea the station operated under my corporate umbrella. She had no idea the intellect she flaunted was mine. I closed the folder. The barbecue invitation still glowed on the screen of my phone. Paige wanted to play Happy Family and show off her boss to Arthur and Beverly. Perfect. I typed a reply, I'll bring the laptop. The backyard filled up quickly. Arthur fired up the oversized stainless steel grill, smoke curling above the same crimson and gold balloons left over from his birthday. Beverly arranged trays of coleslaw and cornbread on the picnic tables, wiping her hands on a frilly apron that read "Kiss the Cook." Riley sat in a lawn chair, swinging her legs and scrolling through her phone, glancing up occasionally to offer a half-hearted wave to a cousin. Paige floated between the guests, laughing too loudly, clutching a bottle of imported beer like a stage prop, her curls bouncing with every step. I carried my laptop bag over my shoulder, the dessert I was supposed to bring forgotten in the backseat of my car. Julian arrived in a sharp navy blazer, shaking hands with Arthur and nodding politely at Beverly. Paige immediately grabbed his arm and steered him toward the center table, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter. "Everyone. This is my boss, Julian Cole. He's the reason I'm absolutely killing it at the station." Arthur clapped him on the back, beaming. "Hear that? Our girl is a star." Beverly smiled, adjusting a bowl of potato salad. "Finally, someone recognizes real talent." I set the laptop on the table, pushing aside a platter of deviled eggs. I flipped it open and hit play. The screen lit up with side-by-side comparisons. My original briefs on the left, Paige's ad segments on the right. The fonts matched perfectly. The taglines were identical. The timestamps glowed in accusatory red, showing upload dates under her login that predated her creation dates by years. The noise in the yard faded. Fox froze mid-air. A cousin stopped mid-bite, a piece of lettuce dangling from his fork. Paige's smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. "What is this?" Julian leaned closer, scrolling through the files, his expression hardening with every click. The polite guest facade dissolved into the cold demeanor of an executive assessing liability. Arthur squinted at the screen, confused. "Nora, what are you doing?" Beverly's hand flew to her mouth, twisting the fabric of her apron in silence. I kept my voice steady, projecting just enough to be heard over the low hum of the pool filter. 5 years of my campaigns. Stolen, stripped of my name, and aired under hers. Paige lunged for the laptop, panic flaring in her eyes. "Turn it off. That's private." Julian stepped between us, his movement fluid and authoritative. "Private?" He looked around the table, his voice sharp and clear. "This is company property." For the record, Julian continued, addressing the silent group, "I don't run WBN News 12. I manage the local branch for Meridian Dynamics." Beverly blinked, confused. "Meridian what?" Arthur frowned. "Never heard of it." Julian turned to me, his manner calm and deliberate. "Nora owns the parent company. I report directly to her." The silence was instant and absolute. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the patio. Riley dropped her phone. It hit the patio stones with a sickening crack, the screen shattering. Arthur's tongs clattered onto the grill grate, sending a shower of sparks into the humid air. Beverly's tray of coleslaw slipped from her numb fingers, splattering across the manicured grass in a creamy, chaotic mess. Paige spun toward me, her face drained of all color, looking like a ghost in a sundress. You're my boss?" I met her gaze, feeling nothing but a cold, quiet resolve. "Always have been." Julian pulled a folder from the inside pocket of his blazer, printed logs, highlighted upload times, metadata reports. He handed copies to Arthur, to Beverly, and finally, he set one down in front of Paige, who was trembling. "Intellectual property theft, plagiarism, breach of contract," Julian recited, his voice devoid of pity. "Effective immediately, Paige Vance is terminated. Security will escort you from all Meridian facilities to collect your personal effects." Julian handed the dossiers to Arthur, Beverly, and anyone else close enough to reach for the truth with a trembling hand. "Intellectual property theft, plagiarism, breach of contract. Effective immediately, Paige Vance is terminated. Security will escort you from all Meridian facilities to collect your personal effects. Paige's mouth opened and closed, fish-like. No sound came out. Her imported beer slipped from her slack grip, the bottle toppling and sending a wave of foam across the linen tablecloth. Arthur finally found his voice. Nora, you built all this. I gave a single, sharp nod, watching the papers rustle as they were passed from hand to hand. A cousin whispered something scandalized to his wife. Riley picked up her phone from the papers, staring blankly at the spiderweb fracture on the screen. Beverly looked from the documents to me, as if realizing she had been sharing a home with a stranger for 20 years. How long? Arthur asked, his voice hollow. Long enough. Julian turned to Paige. Clear your desk by Monday. Each hour will mail your final check, minus restitution for the fraudulent campaigns you misrepresented. Paige stumbled back, beer foam soaking into her expensive blouse. This is a joke. You can't do this. I just did. Behind us, the oversized grill hissed, the unattended sticks charring into carbon on the grates. The red and gold balloons swayed lazily in the breeze, brushing against the cedar fence with a soft, mocking squeak. No one moved to help her. The cousins shifted awkwardly, averting their eyes to study their shoes or the horizon. Riley pulled her knees to her chest in the lawn chair, silent. I closed the laptop, the screen fading to black. Arthur cleared his throat, but the defense he wanted to mount died in his throat. Beverly frantically wiped coleslaw from her sandals, her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. Paige stood isolated in the center of the patio, the party disintegrating around her. Julian pocketed the master file. I'll handle the legalities. I shouldered my laptop bag and walked toward the side gate without looking back. Arthur knocked on my door the next evening. I opened it to find him standing on the porch of my apartment building. He looked disheveled, suit rumpled, tie loosened, eyes rimmed with red. He held a thick manila envelope, its edges still crisp. We need to talk, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door and leaned against it, keeping the exit blocked. He paced the small living room, the envelope tapping rhythmically against his thigh. Paige is devastated. That scene at the barbecue. It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said calmly. He stopped pacing and faced me. She's family, Nora. You can't ruin her life over some computer files. I crossed my arms. She ruined herself. Arthur slapped the envelope onto the coffee table. $250,000. An inheritance from your mother's side that I was holding onto for the right moment. Take it. Drop the claims. Let Julian reinstate her. I stared at the envelope. The paper looked heavy, even from across the room. You think money fixes theft? It buys silence, he corrected, nudging it closer to me. Sign a non-disclosure agreement. We'll say the campaigns were a collaborative effort. Everyone walks away clean. I picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of the check inside. Where did you get this kind of cash, Arthur? He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the window. Savings. Investments. The doorbell buzzed. Riley's face appeared on the security feed. I pressed the release button. She stormed in a moment later, brushing past Arthur without a glance, clutching her phone like a lifeline. I have to show you something, she said, breathless. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Riley, go home. She ignored him, tapping her screen and casting the feed to my television. A grainy video call connected, showing documents spread across a dorm room desk. Bank statements, charity ledgers, wire transfer records. "I volunteer at the foundation," Riley said, her voice shaking. "I was helping reconcile the books for the audit. Last year, $75,000 went missing." Arthur lunged for the remote. "Turn that off." Riley swiped the screen, bringing up a specific transaction. It went to Paige's condo down payment. I found the wire transfer marked as a consulting fee. It was sent the same day she closed on the place. I opened the envelope Arthur had given me. The check wasn't drawn from personal funds. It was drawn on the foundation's account. Arthur's signature was scrawled at the bottom in blue ink. He backed toward the door, his face paling. "This is private family business." Riley faced him, tears standing in her eyes. "Embezzlement isn't private, Dad." I held up the check. "You stole from scholarship funds to bail her out." Arthur's face reddened, the veins in his neck bulging. "I protected my daughter." "Which one?" I asked quietly. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Riley's phone buzzed, an automated alert. Another document loaded on the screen, audit trail confirmed. Board notification pending. Arthur grabbed his coat. "You will regret this." He slammed the door behind him, the frame rattling. Riley sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I didn't know what else to do. I sat beside her and tore the check in half, then into quarters, letting the confetti drift to the floor. The messages started flooding in within the hour. Paige's texts came first. Dozens of them, manic and pleading. "Please, Nora. Delete the files. I'm sorry. We can fix this. We're sisters." Then the voicemails followed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "If you don't stop this, I'll tell everyone you're jealous. Unstable. You lose clients. Meridian will collapse." I listened to one, then blocked her number. The calls turned into emails. Long, rambling paragraphs about family loyalty, about how Arthur had raised us, about how I owed them for the roof over my head. She attached screenshots of drafted social media posts ready to launch. "My sister sabotaged my career out of spite. #toxicfamily, #boycott Meridian." Arthur's formal threat arrived via courier the next morning. A thick envelope with his handwriting on the front. Inside was a plea written on charity letterhead, devolving into a threat. "Withdraw the claims. Sign the attached waiver. Or we go public. We will say your empire is built on lies. We will say you use your mother's death to manipulate clients. Your reputation will end. We will claim you use your mother's death as a shield for incompetence," the letter read. "Clients will flee. You will be ruined." I skimmed the attached waiver. It demanded a full retraction, a non-disclosure agreement, and a complete release of liability. The threat at the bottom was underlined in heavy ink: "Refuse, and we expose everything. Your reputation ends here." Then came Riley's email. The subject line read, "Please listen. Paige is desperate. Dad is scared. Delete the evidence and we can forget this ever happened. I'll come visit. We can talk like we used to. You're still my sister." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded everything to my attorney, Rachel Stein. Rachel called within the hour. "This is textbook defamation, coercion, and emotional manipulation, she said, her voice crisp and reassuring. We are filing a cease and desist immediately. I'll also draft a formal notice regarding the embezzlement evidence we hold. If they want war, we'll give them a nuclear winter. Rachel drafted the letter on heavy firm stationery. It stated clearly that any further contact, social media posts, or public statements violating non-disparagement laws would result in immediate legal action for libel, slander, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Cease immediately, the letter concluded. I signed it digitally. Rachel sent certified copies to Arthur, Beverly, Paige, and Riley. No response was required. Paige's online campaign started anyway. It began with anonymous Twitter accounts tagging Meridian Dynamics' biggest clients. Heard the CEO steals ideas. Fraud alert. Toxic workplace. Likes trickled in, followed by a few curious shares. A handful of clients emailed me with polite but concerned questions. I replied to each one personally, attaching Rachel's legal filing and the forensic timeline of the theft. The chatter died overnight. Arthur tried once more, a voicemail from a blocked number. You're tearing this family apart, Nora. Think of Riley. She looks up to you. I deleted it before he finished the sentence. 2 days later, Riley showed up at the office lobby. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her posture defeated. Security called me down. She held a cardboard coffee cup like a peace offering, her voice small and trembling. Can we talk? Just us? I looked at her, the sister who had watched me pack my bags years ago and said nothing. The sister who wanted me to bury the truth to save the people who had erased me. I shook my head. No more talks. Nora, please. Goodbye, Riley. I turned back to the elevators. She left the coffee on the counter and walked out. I blocked her number before the elevator doors closed. A week later, the house in Lexington appeared on the real estate listings. Arthur's name was still on the deed, but the photos showed a staging that felt desperate. Beverly's car was visible in the driveway in one of the exterior shots. I packed my apartment, donated the furniture I didn't need, and hired movers. The new office in Seattle was waiting, a clean start in the Pacific Northwest. Arthur's final letter arrived the day before I left. It had been forwarded through his lawyer. It outlined his probation terms and ended with a handwritten scrawl, "I'm sorry. Forgive me." I fed it to the shredder, then tossed the confetti into the fireplace. I watched the flames curl the paper into ash, feeling absolutely nothing. Paige sent one last email. You win. I'm nothing now. I marked it as spam. Riley sent a text from a new number. I miss you. I deleted it. The moving truck pulled away at dawn. The suburbs of Lexington faded in the rearview mirror, the sprawling estates and the house that had never been a home disappearing into the mist. The Seattle skyline rose ahead of me days later, the Space Needle sharp against the gray sky, the mountains standing guard in the distance. I changed my phone number. I updated the company contacts. There were no more Vances in my inbox. Clients pulled back initially. A few cancelled their contracts, citing reputational risk during the transition. Most remained after Rachel's letter circulated and the truth settled. Revenue dipped 5% before stabilizing. Meridian Dynamics endured. Paige's name disappeared from industry directories. She had been blacklisted. No reputable station would consider her resume. The flag for intellectual property theft popped up on every background check. She applied for retail work, barista gigs, anything to pay the bills. Rejections stacked up. Her condo went into foreclosure, and she moved into a cramped studio near the interstate, her neighbors unaware of who she used to pretend to be. Arthur faced the board. The audit confirmed the missing $75,000. Embezzlement charges followed swiftly. He accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial, 3 years of probation, full restitution, and mandatory community service at the very foundation he had stolen from. He wore an ankle monitor on his grocery runs. The charity gala circuit banned him for life. Beverly filed for separation, citing irreconcilable differences. She managed to keep the house by selling off assets, including the red sports car. Arthur rented a bare, one-bedroom apartment downtown. Riley transferred to a university out of state and stopped going home for holidays. From my office in Seattle, overlooking the Puget Sound with ferries cutting through the water below, I watched it all unfold from a distance. The team expanded to 15. Contracts grew, tech integrations, renewables, global strategy. 12 million became 15. Paige's final LinkedIn post read, "Open to opportunities." Her connection requests were turned off. Arthur's probation officer checked in monthly, there were no violations. He volunteered quietly at food banks, a ghost of the man who used to hold court at country clubs. Beverly sold their antique furniture on Marketplace. The photos showed empty, echoing rooms. One evening, I stood on the rooftop deck of my building, the city lights flickering below like a sea of stars. There were no more messages, no more threats. Only peace. Cutting ties hadn't been an act of revenge. It was an act of release. Paige learned that actions echo. Arthur learned that privilege has limits. Beverly learned that blind loyalty is a poor investment. And for anyone watching, family is not an obligation. Protect your work, your peace, and your future. Blood does not excuse betrayal. Walk away when you must. Rebuild stronger. Cutting ties is freedom. That is the truth I live now. And it is enough.